7:45 in the morning. He is here. State Representative, House Majority Leader Dave Reed for another week.
Todd, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Good to have you with us here today.
Good to be here.
All right, so this is your final appearance as our State House member and House Majority Leader, and so we want to do some reflecting here, and I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about your time in Harrisburg. You first got there, how long ago was it?
16 years.
16 years. In all of those times, I'm sure that you've had some people that you knew were go-to guys or go-to gals there in Harrisburg that you knew that for solid advice, for leadership, you could go to them and you knew that it was going to be good stuff that you were getting from them, right?
Yeah.
Who would they be?
Well, in 16 years, there's quite a few folks who fit into that category. Probably a couple of them, had local connections. Senator White, even though he only came in 2 years before me, he had an awful lot of experience just in the world in general before I came into office, being, as I always like to remind him, when I was younger, he was almost double my age when I came into office. It's not nearly as funny when I'm 40 myself now. And it's Sam Smith up from the Punxsutawney area. And Sam probably a little bit more directly just because he was in the House, and when I came to the House, he was already in leadership. And pretty quickly, I think it was about 3 months into my first term when Speaker Matt Ryan passed away, Sam became Majority Leader. So, Sam had been in either Majority Leader, Minority Leader, or Speaker my entire tenure. So he was always kind of that person that could help balance the Harrisburg perspective with the local perspective and the personal perspective because, his family knew Heather's family, well before I got into politics or even before I met Heather. So I think Sam probably more than anybody else. And then by extension, his chief of staff, a guy by the name of Tony Aliano, who was based out of Harrisburg, who eventually actually is my chief of staff right now in Harrisburg and has served in that position for a couple years for me. I think just Sam more than anybody else kind of helped just guide me as a young legislator and then somebody rising through the ranks to a leadership position. And he's somebody I've still talked to, even though he's left the legislature during my tenure as Majority Leader, just to, give him a call or a text message and say, hey, here's what we're dealing with. When you dealt with a similar type of situation, how did you handle it?
Yeah. I want to give you the chance this morning to brag a little bit on the people that work in your office, too, because you've got people working here and in Harrisburg that you can't do what you do without them, can you?
No, and I have been very, very lucky over the years. I've had some amazing folks work for me. I've had some amazing folks intern for me, and it's been kind of really, for me, very rewarding to see where some of those folks have ended up over the years. They've done some amazing things with their lives, and I've always been very particular about who I bring into my offices, particularly as I've moved up in leadership, because I've always been a firm believer that you have to have a team around you that not just is talented and hardworking, but actually enjoys coming to work with one another, and I enjoy seeing them at work, because in a profession like this, if you don't have folks who actually like each other, it makes it very difficult to do the job on a daily basis. And, here locally, the last number of years, Jonathan just left for First Commonwealth, but he's been with me for 14 years. He was actually referred to me by my wife, Heather. They went to high school together when he was the director of the Tourist Bureau, and I was looking for somebody to take over the district offices, and he just did an awesome job for 14 years. And the three ladies I have in the district right now, Jen from Blairsville has manned that office my entire tenure. And then up here in Indiana with Shannon and Adrian, they've just been stalwarts of, getting things done, with the last couple of years, with the position I've been in, with the budget negotiations, I've had to travel far more than the first 12 years in office, and they've really just picked up the ball. Adrian in particular, just balancing, making sure my schedule, Harrisburg, and the district and our family schedule all coordinated with one another, and I got done what I needed to get done. And, they, for a lot of items, sit in my office and everybody will be on the phone and the phone rings. I pick it up and I've got to put people on hold because who they really need to talk to is Shannon or Adrian and not me, because they know how to, solve some of these bureaucratic issues or driver's license issues or domestic issues, those type of things, much quicker than I have, because that's what they do on a daily basis. So they've done an amazing job.
Yeah, and I want to thank Adrian as well, because working with her down through the years, first here and then with you, she's phenomenal. She really is.
Yeah, we try not to remind everybody here that we actually stole her from the radio stations a number of years ago to come work in the office, but she's been great.
I know it, by golly. Well, your tenure is just about over in Harrisburg, and so I want to give you a chance to look into the crystal ball here and predict some of the outcomes or some of those desired outcomes that you'd like to see happen in Pennsylvania in the next 3 or 5 years. And so let's take a look at some of the issues, the big issues in the state. Some of them may be unresolved from your time in office, some of them that you expect to come up that we're going to have to deal with in Pennsylvania over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think the budget is always going to be at the forefront. The numbers look pretty good right now, but you just don't know how that's going to hold for the next 6 months. So I think long term, we started the transition to a different approach to budgeting. Instead of just looking at the previous year and saying, all right, we're going to do, 5% increase or a 5% cut across the board. I think there needs to be a more thorough examination of where is this money going, how is it being spent, and most importantly, what results are we getting for those dollars? Because we've got an awful lot of programs out there that have been on autopilot for decades, and I think an evaluation of, okay, here's the issue we want to resolve, here's what we've been trying to do, are we getting the results we want? And if not, maybe it's time to reprogram that money to try to solve that issue in a different way. I think a comprehensive evaluation of our tax system in Pennsylvania is well overdue. That includes the property tax issue, personal taxes, business taxes in particular. The system was kind of set up in a piecemeal fashion over the last 50, 60 years. And I think an evaluation of, okay, well, what makes sense, not just in 2018, but what makes sense in 2028 for this state? I mean, they did it at the federal level. It's had significant positive economic impacts on the economy. I think that could be done at the state level. And I think, excuse me, whoever's governor has an interest in that issue, whether it be Scott Wagner or Tom Wolf, have both expressed an interest in taking a look at that issue. Property taxes certainly fall into that category. That's been one of the more frustrating issues for me locally. It's been a bit of a roller coaster on that issue. For years, a lot of folks were like, well, yeah, I'd like to see property taxes eliminated, but it's not really a top 5 issue for me, depending on where you lived and what your taxes were. When the reassessment came through, it obviously became a top tier, if not number 1 issue for most folks in this community. The difficulty with that issue is different communities feel differently. You go to the southeastern portion of the state, they're fine with property taxes. You go to the northern tier, their average property taxes maybe $800 a year. Not a big issue for them. You go to an area with a lot of retail shopping like Grove City or Washington County or border communities. They don't want to do anything with the sales tax because they have folks coming in out of state, out of country to shop with the exemption for clothing in that regard. So, I hope that folks will maybe narrow the discussion, focus on trying to eliminate school property taxes, at least for residential properties, at least for properties where it's your primary residence, not a rental property, not a vacation home or anything like that, because it's only about 40% of the revenue needed to just do residential primary home properties in the state. So that's probably a little bit easier of a nut to crack to try to resolve that issue. And at least that's the first step towards, total elimination, if you can get it eliminated on your primary home where nobody's losing their home as a result of school property taxes. And certainly the momentum on Senate Bill 76 stalled in the Senate this year, but I have a feeling that'll be coming back, next year as a primary issue. So, I think there's a host of issues on the horizon, hopefully focused on economic prosperity in the state and, setting up the state for the long term.
You've worked with primarily 3 governors, Rendell, Corbett, Wolf. They have all had very, very different philosophies when it comes to setting up a state budget. And some very, very hands-on. Some have been well, they have demanded that their parties follow them into the fray. Some have said, you guys can sit on the sideline. This is what I want, and this is what I'm going to get. Those three different personalities, those three different approaches, without saying one's better or one's not, what's it like to deal with a governor's office in terms of setting up a budget and their philosophy versus maybe legislators?
I think probably my response should probably just be, keyed with the fact that, one of those governors, I was the primary negotiator for the House. So I had a more up close and personal interaction with Governor Wolf than I did Governor Corbett or Governor Rendell in that regard. So I had a little bit more inside knowledge. Now with Governor Corbett, I was in leadership, so I got to experience some of the negotiations, but certainly not anywhere close to the same level as Governor Wolf. I guess my impression, now all three also dealt with different economic times. Governor Rendell dealt with a deficit, then dealt with surpluses, and then dealt with the deficit again with the recession of 2008. Governor Corbett got stuck with almost a constant recession during his 4 years. And Governor Wolf, the first 2 years were rough. The last year, turned out pretty well in that regard. I would say, I think Governor Rendell is kind of what you think of when you think of a larger-than-life political personality, and that showed with his approach to budgeting, where he would throw out every idea imaginable into a budget address. And, if he threw 12 new ideas, completely unrelated to budgeting in his budget demands, he was hoping to get one or two of them. He was a constant negotiator. Let's make a deal. Let's figure out what you can get, what I can get, and we can all be happy and we can all be done. With Governor Corbett, I think just by nature of walking into about a $4 billion deficit with the federal stimulus dollars disappearing, he got marred into this constant discussion on, what are we cutting, how much are we cutting, and how can we cut more, which is a legitimate discussion given the circumstances. But he never got to a broader vision of, okay, well, here's why we have to get this budget balanced in this manner, because this is where I want to go in the future. This is what I'm trying to set up so that we don't have to do these decisions again. And with Governor Wolf, I think particularly in the first couple years, it was more of an exercise on political philosophy. He had a very intellectual mind when it comes to public policy. He had not dealt with public policy in practical terms in the real world. So I think he looked at it more from a textbook perspective of, this is how I think the world should be. Let's just do it. Without, kind of thinking through, okay, well, this is my view. There's a whole lot of other views out there. The state is very, very different. How do I merge your view and my view together so that we have one common view? And I think he started to move in that direction in the last year and a half, but it's taken him a little while to get there. And he also tried, the approach of the old Lincoln approach of team of rivals. He took all of his primary opponents and basically made them, his inner advisors, his chief of staff, his policy secretary, Not everybody's Lincoln. Not everybody has those sort of rivals who truly put everything aside to take care of the individual at the top. And I think some of those folks, weren't necessarily giving him the best advice the first couple of years. And he's brought in some newer folks who have done a much improved job advising him and helping him, try to manage the state.
I think it's kind of interesting to look at the way that we work in Harrisburg with our lawmakers and with our governors. There's such a big learning curve. They come from different backgrounds, and usually they're not lawmaking backgrounds. It has been a pleasure to have you on the program all of these years. I want to thank you for being so conscientious about coming in here and visiting with us and putting up with me.
Todd, it's been a great partnership. I've enjoyed the opportunity. It's nice to just have a one-on-one discussion just about issues going on locally and at the state level over the years. So thank you for that partnership, Todd.
He is our State House Majority Leader, Dave Reed.